Tekken has one of the biggest rosters in fighting game history. Over 50 characters across decades of games, and not all of them deserve to be there. Some are weak, some are pointless, and some make you wonder if anyone at Namco actually playtested them before shipping the disc. Today, I'm breaking down the most useless characters in the entire franchise, starting with the one who started it all, Dr. Boskonovich. In 1997, someone at Namco sat down, looked at a roster full of martial artists, demons, and military operatives, and said, "You know what this game needs? An elderly Russian scientist who fights people with beakers." And somehow, that got approved. Dr. Boskonovich was introduced in Tekken 3 as a bonus unlockable character, and he is exactly what he sounds like. A frail old man in a lab coat swinging laboratory equipment at people who could reasonably kill him in a single punch. He doesn't have a fighting style. He has a workplace accident. Here's the thing. Boskonovich wasn't just bad, he was deliberately bad. His moveset was intentionally absurd, his frame data was atrocious, and his tournament viability was basically zero. Nobody picked him in competitive play because picking him was the equivalent of telling your opponent you didn't feel like winning today. He appeared in Tekken 3, Tekken Tag Tournament, and Tekken Tag Tournament 2. 3 games across 15 years. And in none of them did he matter. Now, some fans will argue that Boskonovich was never properly explored, that his true potential went undiscovered because nobody bothered investing time into learning a character who looked like he wandered out of a chemistry lab and into the wrong building. And honestly, that's a fair point. But it also doesn't matter. When your character design is old man trips over his own equipment, you're not exactly inspiring people to grind out frame-perfect combos in training mode. Boskonovich was Tekken's original meme character before meme characters were even a concept. He proved that Namco was perfectly willing to burn a roster slot on a joke, which is, you know, not ideal, but at least Boskonovich was human. The next character on this list isn't even the right species. Gon. If you played Tekken 3 as a kid, you remember Gon. If you didn't, you probably think I'm making this up. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you, because trying to explain Gon to someone who's never seen him is like trying to convince a stranger that you once fought a tiny orange dinosaur in a fighting game, which is exactly what happened. Gon was a guest character pulled straight from a Japanese manga of the same name. He was a little dinosaur. Not a humanoid dinosaur, not a dinosaur-themed fighter, just a small, round, angry dinosaur roughly the height of everyone else's kneecaps. Namco looked at their roster of martial artists, demons, and military operatives and said, "You know what this needs? A reptile the size of a fire hydrant." And then they actually did it. Here's the thing. Gon wasn't just a visual gag, his hitbox was genuinely broken. Because he was so short, half the roster's moves would literally sail over his head. Mid-attacks, some highs, certain strings that worked on every other character in the game just didn't connect. You'd be playing as Jin Kazama, heir to the Devil Gene, throwing a perfectly timed combo, and it would phase through this little dinosaur like he wasn't even there. He could also breathe fire and fart to attack people, which is, you know, not ideal for the competitive integrity of your fighting game. He was a PlayStation exclusive character, and unlocking him was its own little adventure. You had to either beat him in Tekken Ball mode or enter Gon as your name after getting a high score in survival mode. And after that single appearance, he vanished completely. No Tekken Tag Tournament cameo, no Tekken 5 throwback, no DLC revival, nothing, just gone. The widely accepted explanation is that licensing issues with the manga's creator made bringing him back either impossible or not worth the legal headache. But nobody's ever officially confirmed that, so it remains one of those Tekken mysteries that people just kinda shrug at. And the wild part is how hard this contrasts with modern guest characters. Negan from The Walking Dead got a full cinematic reveal trailer, a marketing push, and voice acting from the actual actor. Noctis from Final Fantasy got the same treatment. Gon got quietly stuffed into a PlayStation game in 1998 and was never spoken of again. He exists purely as a fever dream for people who were alive in the late 90s and a conspiracy theory for everyone else. But at least Gon had the excuse of being a licensed character from another franchise. The next entry on this list doesn't even have that defense. Miharu Hirano. Tekken has demons, it has cyborgs, it has a bear that watches television and a dinosaur that boxes. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, someone at Namco looked at the roster and said, "You know what this game needs? A regular schoolgirl with zero personality." That's Miharu Hirano, She showed up in Tekken 4 back in 2001, and her entire character concept can be summarized in about 4 words. She's Xiao Yu's friend. That's it. That's the whole thing. No demon blood, no corporate conspiracy, no vendetta against the Mishima family. She's just a teenage girl who apparently wandered into the King of Iron Fist tournament because she had nothing better to do on a Tuesday. Here's the thing, most joke characters in Tekken at least commit to a bit. Gon is a tiny dinosaur. Mokujin is a sentient wooden dummy. Roger Jr. is a kangaroo in boxing gloves. These are absurd concepts, but they're memorable absurd concepts. Miharu's gimmick is that she doesn't have one. She's a normal human being in a franchise where gods punch through mountains. It's like showing up to a superhero movie and one of the characters is just some guy named Dave who works at a call center, and mechanically, she barely justified her own existence. Her moveset was essentially a palette swap of Ling Xiaoyu's, with minimal unique identity to separate the two. So minimal, in fact, that by Tekken 5, they didn't even bother making her a real character anymore. Selecting Miharu just gave you Xiao Yu in a school uniform. That's not a character slot, that's a costume. She eventually came back as a proper roster entry in Tekken Tag Tournament 2, and across both actual playable appearances, she contributed exactly nothing that Xiao Yu didn't already cover. She was a copy of a copy with the contrast turned down. What makes this genuinely baffling is that Panda, a literal bear, has more character development and narrative presence than Miharu does. A bear with 0 lines of dialogue, still more interesting. Panda has motivations, rivalries, story beats. Miharu has a school uniform and vibes. She's a relic of early 2000s fighting game design, where adding another cute girl to the roster was considered sufficient justification for a character slot. No story purpose, no mechanical uniqueness, no competitive relevance. The series quietly stopped bringing her back, and honestly, it took most people years to even notice she was gone, which is, not ideal when you're supposed to be a fighting game character. But if you think being a forgettable clone is bad, wait until you meet the character who literally has no moveset of his own. Every fighting game has characters that are bad. Mokujin isn't bad. Mokujin is a philosophical crisis disguised as a wooden training dummy. Here's the deal. Mokujin first showed up in Tekken 3 back in 1997, and the concept is genuinely unhinged. He's a wooden puppet, literally a practice dummy, who copies a completely random fighter's entire moveset at the start of every single round. Not every match. Every round. So you could be playing as a Mokujin who fights like King for 15 seconds, and then suddenly you're playing as a Mokujin who fights like Eddie Gordo. You don't get to pick. You don't get to prepare. You just get whatever the game decides to hand you, like a fighting game slot machine that occasionally pays out in roundhouse kicks. And here's where it gets complicated. Mokujin is simultaneously the strongest and weakest character in the entire franchise depending on which random draw you get. You could land on a style you've never touched in your life and get absolutely destroyed. Or you could accidentally roll into the exact counter for your opponent's main and look like a genius. Neither outcome has anything to do with skill. It's pure chaos. The competitive community has 0 use for him, obviously. You can't practice against a Mokujin player because there's nothing to practice against. You can't develop Mokujin strategies because his strategy changes every 30 seconds. He is anti-competitive by design. He's the equivalent of showing up to a chess tournament and being told your pieces move differently every turn. Good luck, but the truly baffling part isn't that Mokujin exists. It's that Namco keeps bringing him back. This wooden dummy has appeared in nearly every mainline Tekken game since his debut. That's more appearances than several characters who actually have movesets and backstories and, faces. They even gave him a metal variant called Tetsujin because apparently one randomized nightmare puppet wasn't enough. They needed to. Let me be clear about what Mokujin actually is. He's a training dummy that someone in a boardroom looked at and said, yeah, give him a character select portrait. He was born from a practice tool. His entire identity is having no identity. He copies everyone and masters nobody. He's not a character. He's a concept that got a health bar, and somehow he's been in the roster for over 25 years. Which is, not ideal for anyone who takes this series seriously. But if you think a wooden puppet with an identity crisis is a weird roster choice, wait until you hear about the kangaroo. Roger Jr. is a fighting kangaroo, and I need you to sit with that for a second. Not because it's weird for Tekken, because honestly, a boxing kangaroo isn't even top 5 strangest things in this franchise. The real problem is that Roger Jr. exists because his dad existed. And his dad existed because someone at Namco in the mid-90s thought a boxing kangaroo was peak comedy, which, to be fair, it kinda was. In 1995, the original Roger showed up in Tekken 2 as a novelty pick. Hey, look at this character you'd select once, laugh at, and never touch again. That should have been the end of it. But Tekken looked at this kangaroo and said, you know what this guy needs? A son. Enter Roger Jr. debuting in Tekken 5. He's smaller than his father because the developers decided to honor the passage of time in their kangaroo lore. Someone sat in a meeting and pitched generational kangaroo continuity, and nobody in that room stopped them. I don't know what to tell you. The moveset is where things go from funny to painful. Roger Jr. features a stance-based system with unique hopping mechanics that sound interesting on paper. In practice, those hops translate to some of the worst frame data in the game. His recovery windows are enormous, his punishment options are limited, and his hitbox, thanks to that smaller kangaroo frame, creates situations where moves that should connect simply don't. He's fighting an uphill battle against every human-sized character on the roster, which is basically everyone. But here's where the generational decline really kicks in. Roger Jr. appeared in Tekken 5, came back in Tekken 6, and made his final stand in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Each time, he got worse. Not slightly less viable worse. Measurably, documentably worse. His competitive results across all 3 entries are virtually non-existent. Tournament players treated him like he didn't exist, because functionally, he didn't. Compared to the rest of the cast, Roger Jr.'s key moves are consistently slower on startup, more punishable on block, and less rewarding on hit. You're working twice as hard for half the damage. It's like trying to win a Formula 1 race on a tricycle, a very angry tricycle with boxing gloves, but a tricycle nonetheless. And the truly incredible part is that Tekken committed to this. 3 games, 3 separate development cycles where someone saw Kangaroo Jr. on the roster spreadsheet and approved it for another round. They built Kangaroo family lore across an entire console generation. Roger Sr. had a wife, there were cutscenes, animators animated Kangaroo idle stances. And for what? A character that 0 people were selecting in bracket play. Roger Jr. is the definition of a legacy problem. He wasn't good enough to justify his own existence, but he'd been around long enough that cutting him felt like admitting the whole kangaroo experiment was a mistake, which it was. But at least Roger Jr. had a personality, even if that personality was small kangaroo who loses. That's more than we can say for the next entry on this list. Sebastian. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I tried to research Sebastian, I really did. And what I found was essentially nothing. That's not a joke setup. That's the actual situation. Sebastian is a character who exists in the Tekken franchise the same way a ghost exists in your attic. Technically there, functionally irrelevant, and nobody can quite agree on the details. I went through wikis, forums, community databases, old match footage archives, and the result was the informational equivalent of opening an empty refrigerator. Just cold air and disappointment. Here's what I can tell you. Sebastian appeared as a playable character in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. He's Lily's butler. That's it. That's the biography. He's an elderly man in a suit who serves a rich teenager, and somebody at Bandai Namco looked at that concept and went, yeah, give him a health bar. Which is a bold creative decision in the same way that putting a potted plant on the character select screen would be a bold creative decision. His moveset? Basically a reskin of Lily's fighting style, except performed by a man who looks like he should be carrying a silver tray instead of throwing high kicks. His story relevance? 0. Not minimal. Literally 0. His competitive presence? I have seen more tournament representation from actual furniture. Mokujin is a wooden training dummy, and he has a more passionate fanbase than this man. Let that sink in for a second. The thing about Sebastian is that his uselessness isn't even the interesting kind. Dr. Boskanovich is useless in a funny way. Gon is useless in a legally complicated way. Sebastian is useless in the way that a blank page in the middle of a novel is useless. You turn to it, there's nothing there, and you just keep going. Nobody stops to ask questions. Nobody writes letters to the publisher. The page simply exists, taking up space between things that actually matter. I genuinely could not find a single dedicated competitive guide for this character. Not one. There are in-depth guides for characters who appeared in one game 15 years ago and never came back, and Sebastian has somehow dodged even that baseline level of attention. The Tekken community is one of the most thorough, obsessive fighting game communities on the planet. These people document frame data down to individual startup animations. And collectively, without even needing to discuss it, they have all agreed that Sebastian is simply not worth the effort. If a character's primary claim to fame is that nobody remembers they exist, that tells you everything. Sebastian isn't bad. He isn't broken. He isn't controversial. He's just nothing. A butler who showed up to one game, stood politely in the corner of the roster, and waited for someone to notice him. Nobody did. I don't know what to tell you, but at least Sebastian has the dignity of being forgotten quietly. The next character on this list got plenty of attention and still managed to be completely pointless. Up until now, we've been talking about characters that were designed to be jokes. Makujin is a wooden dummy. Gon is a tiny dinosaur. Roger Jr. is literally a kangaroo. You look at those characters and you go, yeah, okay, they weren't meant to be taken seriously. Fair enough, but Gigas was supposed to be cool, and that's what makes him so much worse. Introduced in Tekken 7, Gigas is this massive, hulking humanoid thing. Red skin, cybernetic enhancements, built like someone welded a refrigerator to a slightly larger refrigerator. He looks like a final boss. He looks like the kind of character you'd see in a cinematic trailer punching through a concrete wall while dramatic orchestral music plays. The design is genuinely intimidating. You see Gigas on the character select screen, and your brain goes, oh, that guy probably hits like a freight train. And technically, he does. The problem is everything else about him. Let's start with the competitive side. Gigas has been bottom tier for basically the entire lifespan of Tekken 7. Not underrated low tier that secretly has tools. Not sleeper pick waiting for a patch. Genuine, consistent, nobody is picking this character at tournaments bottom tier. His pick rate at high-level competitive play is so low, he might as well not be on the roster. And the reason is baked directly into his design. He's enormous. That massive character model that looks so cool in screenshots, it means every opponent combo that normally drops against smaller characters just works on Gigas. He's a bigger target, literally. Combos that whiff on Ling Xiaoyu connect clean on him because there's simply more Gigas to hit. So you're playing a character with mediocre tools who also takes more damage than everyone else by virtue of existing, which is, not ideal. But here's where the frustration really sets in. You could forgive weak competitive tools if the character had a great story. Plenty of fighting game characters are beloved despite being low tier because their narrative is compelling. Gigas has nothing. Zero. He shows up in Tekken 7 with no dedicated story mode chapter. There's some vague implication that he might be connected to Katarina's father, that he might be some kind of experiment or cyborg creation, but the game never commits to explaining any of it. He's just there, standing in the roster, being large and red and completely unexplored, and Tekken 8 didn't fix this. He's still around, still massive, still underrepresented at every tournament that matters. The community has been saying the same thing about Gigas for nearly a decade now. Wasted potential. He has the visual design of a character people should care about. The mysterious backstory hooks are right there. The what is he question is genuinely interesting, but Namco never answered it, never gave him the tools to compete, and never gave players a reason to invest in him beyond aesthetics. Gigas is the character equivalent of a movie trailer that's better than the actual film. All promise, zero delivery. He's not a joke, he's something worse. He's a character that could have been great and just wasn't. But if you think an underdeveloped bruiser is bad, wait until you meet the character that half the fanbase wanted removed from the game entirely. This is the entry where the comment section turns into a war zone. Lucky Chloe is either a genuinely underpowered character who deserved every bit of criticism she got, or she's a perfectly fine addition that the Western Tekken community threw a tantrum over, because she had cat ears and did a little dance. Depending on who you ask, you'll get completely different answers. And honestly, both sides have a point. Let's set the stage. Tekken 7 hits Japanese arcades in 2015, and Lucky Chloe is right there in the base roster. K-pop inspired, Aegyo aesthetic, the whole package. She does little cat paw gestures. She has choreographed dance moves built into her combos, and she says Lucky roughly 400 times per match. In Japan, nobody blinked. She fit right in. Then the Western reveal happened, and the internet collectively lost its mind. Why is this in my fighting game? Who asked for this? Give us a real character. The backlash was immediate and loud. So loud, in fact, that Tekken director Katsuhiro Harada started trolling the Western audience, threatening to replace her with a generic muscular character in Western releases. He was joking, obviously. Lucky Chloe shipped in the base roster worldwide, but the fact that the outrage was big enough to warrant a public response from the game's director tells you everything about the temperature of that conversation. But here's where the debate splits into two completely different arguments that people keep mashing together like they're the same thing. On one side, you've got the competitive crowd, and their complaints were legitimate. Lucky Chloe's early frame data was rough. Her moveset leaned heavily on style over substance, prioritizing flashy dance animations over distinctive fighting mechanics that gave players real tools to work with. In player surveys, she consistently ranked as one of the lowest priority characters in the entire Tekken 7 roster. Tournament representation was basically non-existent. Later patches improved her standing, gave her better options, made her more viable, but by that point, the competitive community had already moved on. Nobody was picking her up because the stigma was baked in. On the other side, you've got people who think the hate was never really about frame data at all. They'll point out that plenty of characters launch with bad numbers and get patched into relevance without anyone screaming about roster space. The argument here is that Lucky Chloe's real crime was being a cute, bubbly, K-pop inspired character in a franchise that the Western audience associates with stoic martial artists punching each other through walls. The cultural aesthetic clash did more damage than any tier list ever could, and the frustrating truth is that both of these things are probably true simultaneously. She was underpowered, and the community was predisposed to hate her before anyone even labbed her moves. The balance issues gave people a mechanical justification for a reaction they were already having. She's bad, and I don't like looking at her is a powerful combination when you're trying to get a character blacklisted from tournament play. The result is a character who became one of the most complained about additions in the entire Tekken 7 cycle. Not because she was broken, not because she ruined the meta, but because she existed in a space where legitimate gameplay criticism and aesthetic backlash became completely inseparable. Nobody could have a clean conversation about Lucky Chloe, because every discussion was actually two discussions happening on top of each other. She's the most controversial entry on this list by a mile. But if you think arguing about a catgirl's competitive viability sounds exhausting, wait until we talk about an actual animal. Panda. Okay, I need to be honest with you for a second. Every character on this list so far has earned their spot through some combination of being mechanically broken, narratively empty, or just straight up forgotten by the developers. Panda is none of those things. Panda is here because she's objectively terrible at fighting, and she doesn't care. And somehow that's the most endearing thing in the entire franchise. Let me explain. Panda has been showing up to Tekken tournaments since Tekken 3 in 1997. She's appeared in the Tag Tournament series, she's in Tekken 8, and she's been doing this for nearly 3 decades. That makes her one of the longest-running non-human characters in the entire franchise. She has seniority over half the roster. She's been here longer than some of the developers currently working on the game. And what has she done with all that time? Basically nothing competitive. Her moveset mirrors Kuma's grab-heavy fighting style so closely that calling her a separate character is generous. She's functionally a reskin. Same animations, same frame data, same limitations. You're not picking Panda because she gives you a tactical edge. You're picking Panda because you want to watch a bear slap someone across a volcano stage. Here's where it gets complicated though. Every other character on this list, when I call them useless, there's at least some sting to it. Some sense that the developers failed them or the community rejected them. Panda has near universal fan affection. Players don't just tolerate her, they actively campaign for her inclusion in new games. When Tekken 8's roster was being speculated on, people wanted the bear, not because she'd win tournaments, because she's Panda. And that creates a genuine philosophical problem for a video like this. Is a character truly useless if the entire community loves them? If nobody's picking her in ranked but everyone smiles when she shows up on the character select screen, does the tier list even matter? The answer is yes. She's still terrible. Let's not get carried away. You're bringing a literal bear to a fight against demons and cyborgs and ancient martial arts masters, and the bear doesn't even have her own moveset. In any competitive context, selecting Panda is basically a resignation letter. I am not here to win. I am here to have a good time, and I have accepted the consequences, but that's exactly why she works. Panda earned something that characters like Gigas and Sebastian never could: goodwill. Not through mechanical strength, not through deep lore, but through decades of just showing up, being a bear, and committing to the bit. The franchise kept putting her in games, and players kept loving her for it. She's the proof that personality and long-term presence can matter more than frame data. She's still useless, absolutely bottom tier, competitively irrelevant in every meaningful way. But she's the only character on this list where calling her useless feels like a compliment. Like telling your golden retriever she's bad at math, she doesn't know what that means, and she's having the best day of her life regardless. So yes, Panda is useless. Panda is a clone. Panda is a joke character who has been a joke character for almost 30 years. And Panda is beloved in a way that most serious fighters on the roster will never be. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes the bear wins without winning. But if you think a beloved bear is a strange inclusion on this list, wait until you meet the character who managed to be forgettable while representing an entire region of the world. Every other character on this list has an excuse. Dr. Boskanovich was a joke. Gon was a licensed dinosaur the size of a fire hydrant. Makajin is literally a wooden dummy. Roger Jr. is a kangaroo. Lucky Chloe was designed to annoy you on purpose. Even Panda gets a pass because at least she commits to the bit. Shaheen has no excuse. Introduced in Tekken 7 in 2015, Shaheen was positioned as a legitimate, serious addition to the Tekken roster. A Saudi Arabian fighter with a military background and a personal vendetta. On paper, that sounds like a character who should work. Middle Eastern representation in a franchise that spans the entire globe? Great. A grounded, realistic martial artist in a game full of demons and bears? Perfect. Give him a compelling story, a distinctive fighting style, and let him cook. They did zero of those things. Shaheen's moveset is generic karate with a slide. That's it. That's the whole identity. In a game where every character is supposed to feel mechanically distinct, where Hwoarang has his stance transitions, and King has his chain throws, and Yoshimitsu has whatever Yoshimitsu has going on, Shaheen plays like a default template that the developers forgot to finish customizing. He's the character you'd get if you asked someone who'd never played Tekken to design a Tekken character. Give him a punch. Give him a kick. Make him do a spinny thing. Ship it. His story presence across both Tekken 7 and Tekken 8 is essentially non-existent. He shows up, he fights people, he leaves. No memorable rivalries, no iconic cutscenes, no moments that make you go, oh, that's Shaheen's thing. He doesn't have a thing. His thing is not having a thing. Tournament statistics paint an even sadder picture. Consistently low pick rates across all skill levels in both games. Not bottom tier because he's bad, necessarily, but bottom tier because nobody cares enough to find out if he's good. Players look at the character select screen, see Shaheen, and their eyes just slide right past him like he's a stock photo on a dentist's office wall. And here's what makes Shaheen the perfect character to end this list. Every other entry we've covered today is useless in a way that's at least interesting. A joke character is useless but funny. A clone is useless but familiar. An animal is useless but memorable. Shaheen is useless and boring. He was designed to be taken seriously, marketed as a real addition to the franchise, given a backstory and a motivation and a place on the roster, and he still ended up being the most forgettable fighter in the entire game. That's the most damning kind of failure in character design. Being intentionally silly is forgivable. Being a gimmick is forgivable. Being a bear is apparently very forgivable. But being unintentionally boring? When you were supposed to matter, when the developers looked at a roster of 50 characters and said, yes, this one deserves a slot, that's the real uselessness. Not the characters who tried to make you laugh and missed. The characters who tried to make you care and couldn't even get you to remember their name. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.